are Pro Cannabis Media.
And welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. We're in the studio in Wellesley, just outside of Boston, but we're also talking with Andrew Elk, who's in Somerville, Davis Square, another place outside of Boston, and Dr. Mary Clifton, who is down in the what we call the tri-state area. Is that right, Mary? I mean, New York is part of the tri-state area, is it not?
Yeah, I'm sort of in a suburb of Boston, basically.
Well, we are in a suburb of New York.
That's what I was going to say.
It is. It's just a shoot, you know?
I just like to remind everyone that it all started in Boston. Let's just say with a party. And I guarantee you, not that I was around in 1774, I think, Boston Tea Party. I guarantee you there was cannabis somewhere in that area going on somewhere.
The founding fathers were obsessed. I believe Abraham Lincoln, the famous line goes, Abraham Lincoln separated seeds to determine which of his hemp plants were most potent.
Really?
It's like the founding fathers famously smoked cannabis. They spoke and wrote on the idea that it was like Abraham Lincoln wrote in his diaries that this is a plant that is intoxicating, but it grows from the land and it should not be like the same way back in the day they didn't want alcohol prohibition. They were saying the same things in the 1700s about cannabis, which is wild. But we have historical records that are like, Westerners have been having this argument for literally centuries.
That's fantastic. I didn't know. I mean, there must be somewhere like a group of quotations from famous people in cannabis. That would be a fun thing to put in, in future books or documentaries. That would be a lot of fun. I could see how there'd be a million great ways to use that.
And I think I know someone who's working on a documentary in a book too.
Yeah. I feel like the time to work on the next big project is, right after you finish the last big project. So I do have to get the marketing and everything pulled together around that book, but then you are like, what's next, But actually, more video assets around that book is going to be a good thing to help it. And then we can do, master classes around it and sell it with the document, we just pull things together into really cool little, all kinds of different things that we can provide a lot of high value for. I'd like to get a gorgeous journal together for people who can write down how they're choosing and using and how that response is. There's just so many great products that people need when they're starting out in cannabis, or even when you're in the middle of your journey, like a coloring book, something that has some coloring and some spaces where you can write down your thoughts and opportunities for abstract coloring. I have this great coloring book that has these really beautiful women in it. And I've been putting tattoos on them instead of just coloring them like ordinary coloring. But that's, for very certain times. That doesn't happen often when I have that time to relax. But sometimes when I'm with my grandkids, I'll, fool around with crayons and have a lot of fun, playing with that kind of stuff.
You do not look like you're old enough to have grandchildren. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jimmy, you have to find a great plastic surgeon and then you just do every single thing he says. That's the secret to looking young. just fake
we understand that. And thankfully I was blessed with the last name.
And cannabis, yeah.
Thankfully, I was blessed with a last name that will always keep me forever.
Oh, yeah. You will always be Mr. Young.
There you go.
I think when you think about cannabis and cellular apoptosis,
I think about cellular apoptosis all the time. I have no idea what that is.
All the time. Well,
what is that?
Well, your body's cells turn over, there's a process it goes through where a cell is created. And then there's, the reactive oxygen species pathways, when you burn oxygen, you create those reactive pathways, and the MAPK pathway and ceramides are all closely associated with cellular longevity and aging and helping a cell to move to the identification that it's time to die. And cancer cells often get around all those pathways and they learn how to be immortal, or they learn to live a lot longer than an ordinary cell should. So that when you introduce CBD and other cannabinoids into cancer cells, at least in petri dishes, it helps all of those cellular pathways to go back into a more normal apoptosis, which is just cell death. That's the apoptotic pathway. Normal death.
Normal cellular. So I think I've heard some of what, obviously, Dr. Mary, I'm so grateful to have your incredible detail and background. I think what I've heard maybe you talk about, sometimes described as like homeostasis, right? Like people have a hard time understanding how cannabis can do all of these different things. And really they're doing what you're talking about, which is like any cell that starts to get itself out of whack, any bodily process that is deviating, either because of inflammation, which means that your body is sending more cells to an area to fight that inflammation. That's where that redness comes from. Cannabis is actually bringing like homeostatically, homeostasis is this idea that your cells are right in the range they want to be. If they get too high on that range, that's bad. If they get too low on that range, that's bad. But I think that's tying in, just this is a little bit of nugget I had.
Yeah, it works the same way in inflammation to stabilize, but it also helps cells that are on a weird pathway and not recognizing that they should die. It helps them to, move toward a normal cellular death. Because cancer cells, like, you remember that book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Hacks or something? It was about those cervical cancer cells that are still being used today because they refuse to die. They're in petri dishes all over the world, and we study cervical cancer with them. But that's how cancer cells work. But then they get too big for the organism to support. But I do think that you can see less aging with regular cannabis use, because you do drive cells toward that normal cell death and allow things to regenerate on probably a faster path. Because I think that cellular apoptosis, the whole process decreases, as time passes. You don't regenerate as quickly as when you're a youngin' like you, Andrew.
Oh, thank you.
I got a few years on you.
I get it. I get it. Okay. I get it. I do want to go back to what we talked about right before the break about the vaping. Okay.
Oh, yes.
When I first got my medical card in 2013, when Massachusetts first started its program, and I went in and had my little discussion with my patient advocate / bud tender, and got poor advice. It wasn't Revolutionary Clinics, by the way, because you guys didn't.
I'm so glad to hear that.
You didn't exist in 2013. Okay.
Not yet.
That's right. But I do, I talk to a lot of nurse practitioners and registered nurses and cannabis experts about the vaping of the oil, and how some doctors believe that vaping of oil is not natural in your lungs. But what I try to say to them, I say, now, wait a second. When you have a child and you're a parent and your kid's coughing, you put steam on in the bathtub, in the bathroom, and you bring the kid in so he can breathe vapor, which eases the hacking of the cough. So now I understand that's vapor of water, or, becomes steam. Okay. Right. And vapor of oil isn't steam, but it is still a vapor. So I guess my question is, what's safest?
Well, I mean, I absolutely want to defer to the doctor in the conversation for safety. I can provide maybe just a nugget from my anecdotal experience, what we preach at a medical dispensary, and then I'd really love to turn it over to Dr. Mary. So as our head of production, this is the guy who leads all of our new product development. This is the executive in our company who looks after new product creation and development. What he likes to say is that no form of inhaling any kind of combusted material, whether it's like the 2014 slogan from Leafly back in 2014 was "Be wise, vaporize." And Jimmy, what you're getting at is that if we're comparing combustion of flower versus the vaporization of flower, you're talking about smoke that you're inhaling that's at about 1,000 degrees. That's the temperature of a lit tip of a joint. Our throat doesn't like anything that's 1,000 degrees. That's why water pipes are popular, right? They're using either long glass systems or water to cool, condition, and smooth that, so that by the time it gets to our throat and lungs, we cough less. Now, vaporize, but the choice, this is what our executive says to us, the choice to use any kind of, for him, vaporizing is safer and healthier. And he is frankly medicating for an injury that he sustained pretty early in life. And him using vaporized cannabis means that he doesn't need to use opiates. So he is making an informed choice that using vaporizer products are the right product for his set of needs. But when it comes to like vaping oil, what's safest as far as I understand it is we don't want additives. We don't want cutters. We don't want thinning agents. We want pure cannabinoids or terpenes, which are THC, CBD, basically the cannabis chemical compound. But really, for safety and health, I gotta turn it over to Mary. Thank you for letting me go first.
Oh, go ahead.
Dr. Mary.
No, that was really great input. I mean, I love the point about no additives. It was really it's the glycerol and it's the sugars that are breaking down into the formaldehyde, which is really, I mean, the vapes came into the United States with the idea that they were going to decrease tobacco addiction, that they could help with tobacco cessation programs, and they actually, I think, ended up increasing tobacco use. And there's so many people who really are heavily addicted to their vapes. But then there might be an issue with the way that the vaporizer is made, if it's made with a cheap metal like cadmium, or if it's instead made with a stainless steel. So the quality of the vaporizer itself is important. But I think a lot of it has to do with the additives, and particularly the flavorings, because the diacetyls, the products that create the flavorings are generally recognized as safe, but for oral ingestion. And we know that some of these products can cause irreversible lung disease in people who started out with healthy lungs. We know that they can cause, asthma attacks or COPD exacerbations for people who have lung disease. So the inhalation of these flavorings are in large part the problem. And also, as Andrew points out, you're really looking at vaporizing pure cannabis rather than these additive oils too. I mean, the oils you have to use with tobacco, or you have to use them with, CBD, because the best cutting agent for CBD is THC. But if you're using a pure CBD vape, you can't do that. And then you're adding the oils. And then I can't remember. Can you remember, Andrew, which product it is that creates that beautiful big white cloud? And
polyethylene glycol, PEG. Yeah.
And I mean, that's no good, but the consumer really, I mean, you see that all the time in advertising, where somebody is just completely obliterated when they exhale with this big white cloud. And that's, actually a sign of something you should never exhale. Yeah. But I agree with you. When you burn the product, you release, 80 different carcinogens, right? And if you vape, and you do that, even if you just vape whole flower and you're toasting it rather than setting it aflame, you're releasing 1/10 of the carcinogens. So it's a great idea in terms of reducing risk, but still helping to reduce inflammation, not only in the lung tissue, but also systemically, if the vape is done properly. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like safe products. That's what you want. Sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, that's why I go to Rev Clinics. That's why I go to a reputable medical dispensary, because they are there to provide you with medicine that will be safe to ingest. That's the idea, right? To
give you an example of what Rev Clinics, what we might call an honest and good operator, is doing. So we are sourcing. So let's start with some of the great points that Mary made. First, we got to talk about what is the technology. There's the product itself. There's the vaporizer oil, which needs to be free of additives and thinners. Revolutionary Clinics was born in 2017. We were actually born after. You can actually go back to 2013, 2014, when the first polyethylene glycol crises were sort of popping off in California markets and Massachusetts markets. The reason that PEG, this thinner, sort of came into notoriety is that in the beginning, when cannabis producers were creating their very first vape oil cartridges, right? So they didn't know what they were doing. Mary was talking earlier, and I talked earlier about how in order to stabilize certain cannabinoids like CBN, CBD, you need either THC or some kind of oil base in order to be able to inhale these cannabinoids. In the beginning, none of the operators really knew what they were doing, right? They were making these dark, thick, black very purple colored vape oil cartridges, and no one, like, you couldn't heat them up and inhale them, which is why compounds like PEG, vitamin E acetate, these are chemicals that's what they do. They thin things so that they can aerosolize like more effectively. And then that is what it was those aerosolizers and thinners that led to what Mary was talking about with irreversible lung damage, right? I'm very proud to say the revolutionary clinics, because we were born after the PEG crisis. We learned from other operators like sort of early mistakes. So we have never in any way, shape, or form used cutters, thinners, thinning agents, aerosolizers. In no way, shape, or form ever have we used those. And then after VapeGate, what I like to refer to as September 2019 in Massachusetts, Governor Baker changed laws such that now every single vaporizer product, whether it's a vaporizer cartridge, whether it's a vape oil applicator, anything that has the word vape associated with it, you get a little card that shows you that Rev Clinics is buying the absolute highest quality stainless steel and platinum coated, like medical grade stainless steel. Like it is not cheap for us to do this. There are absolutely inferior like hardware out there that we could purchase and make more money on, but we're a medical dispensary. Our first priority is serving medical patients successfully and safely. So it comes down to quality product and quality hardware. And you know, it's not easy to source that, but it is essential. We have found.
But you know, I mean, when this whole thing went down, people I mean, all of a sudden I saw cigarettes on the streets of New York, and and it occurred to me that I never saw anybody smoke. Everybody is vaping. And then after that crisis in September, everybody started to smoke. And then it wasn't 6 weeks. It might have been 2 months. All of a sudden, nobody smoked again. You know, people love to vape. It's so private. And I don't know what the tobacco industry is doing or how they're thinning their products anymore. But I'm just not interested in the tobacco industry enough to try to figure it out. I mean, that's just a product. We need to use more CBD and cannabis to get people off their tobacco, right? But I do love when you're putting together just a gorgeous vape, you know, that you're cutting the waste. I mean, I've had lunch with my friend Warren Babrow in New York, and he'll be just back from a California trip, and he'll be like, you know, try this, taking out like, and he's got something in every pocket. He's so adorable and pleasant to spend time with. He's just such a delightful man. But if you ever get a lunch date with Warren, I mean, just at 100%, that's a date to go on. But then, you know, then it's a vape. It's got 40 inhalations, and when you're done, you throw it out. How is that a good idea? There's a whole bunch of work that went into the creation of this vape. So when you're creating a super high quality stainless steel and platinum, I'm sure that your little cartridges snap in and snap out, and the only thing I'm throwing out is this little bit. You know, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to grab my product I've got right here, but I adore this thing. But again, you're right. Like at this point, I remember in 2017 when I joined the industry, back then, every cartridge you had to screw
I'm all
on.
Like, can you?
Yes, let me. So yes. So it just like magnetically drops in there.
Oh, I love it when it's magnetic. Yeah. That's so neat.
I use the C-cell. The C-cell cartridge.
So yes.
Yeah.
We do have the C-cell, that's sort of little palm battery. We carry many different types of batteries. This is sort of our latest and greatest.
It's solar powered?
Pro. Just shy of, but it is USB-C. And actually it has this lovely little like nonagon 9-sided shapes that when I lay this down, it doesn't roll like all over my desk. It actually stays stationary. So you can stand it upright. But again, like you're saying, Mary, it's these little adjustments that make the technology more user-friendly.
And decrease waste.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Reduce waste and bring more people into cannabis consumption, right? Like my mother, for example, has zero interest in smoking a joint, doesn't want anything to do with it, but she'll do edibles and she'll do vapes. It's like you got to find the right product for the right person.
Andrew, how old's your mom?
My mother is, I don't think it's polite to say a woman's age, but she
Give me a range.
62.
All right, so she's all right, fair enough. Thank you. She's my age.
That's a good range. You know, she's somewhere between 61 and 63.
Right, that works for me. I'm in there. I call that age appropriate. I think that's awesome. You know, one of the things you talk, the disposable vape. Now, is that recyclable or not recyclable? I mean,
really great question, Jimmy. So there is not a single operator from California to Maine who has figured out how to successfully recycle vaporizer cartridges. And I'll tell you why. The second you put marijuana vape oil, whether you're in California, Colorado, Massachusetts, doesn't matter where you are, every state in the union has what are called hazardous waste protection measures. Yeah. It's part of the compliance industry that goes along with many industries. But basically, the second vape oil touches this product, the U.S. government considers this hazardous waste, which means no recycler can take it, touch it, or do anything with it until you have a certificate of authenticity that proves that you have less than 0.03. That is the federal limit for THC in products. Like, you can sense if CBD has less than 0.03 THC, you can move it. I'm sure Dr. Mary knows this. You can't move any CBD product that has more THC than that. So in order to recycle, remember, what is recycling? Recycling is taking a product from one place, usually a house, to a recycling center. The reason the recycling center takes your product is because they are going to wash it, process it, and sell it to someone else. Like, that is what makes a product recyclable. Like, it's why some days, like, plastic milk jugs are recyclable, and the next day, if the price of plastic drops, that jug just became trash, right? That is the recycling system as it exists in the United States. So in order to recycle these, you, either the individual who is buying these cartridges, or if we took them back, we basically have to set up an entire processing center where all we did all day long was sterilize cartridges and then pay about, I think it's $35 to $75 a test. Maybe it's more than that. I haven't checked the laboratory standards, but every single cartridge will need its own test where we prove that you boiled every little bit of THC out of there. So there are actually
just so you could fill it again with THC.
Just so you could fill it again. In order to do this legally, Jimmy, that's what we're on right now. As the law exists today, there are art collectives. There are people in California and Colorado who are making sculptures out of empty cartridges. They're actually buying empty cartridges, because remember, you can't make this into an art installation because it is a hazardous waste product. And if we don't prove that we are destroying these to the state, and what does destruction mean? It means we put in an industrial blender with kitty litter. That is destruction at most dispensaries. Like, if you don't do that, you're shut down. Like, that is the status of recycling. So people say to me, like, oh, I wish that product, it's not recyclable, is it? And like, it's not recyclable anywhere in the world. There is no way to recycle these cartridges right now. So,
well, you learn something new every day. I mean, you would think now, with the cost of gas going so low, that it's going to take the bottom out of the recycling industry, because they'll just have a ton of plastic to be able to produce. Well, for a very low cost.
But it's a complicated problem to solve, Jimmy. That's what I'm really trying to get at. Recycling is a tricky issue.
Yeah, and I interviewed a guy out in California recently who's all about that, creating that zero waste industry that inside the cannabis space. So he's got a lot of work to do too. But I got to tell you, Dr. Mary Clifton, I think we could talk for the next 4 hours and we'd still learn and be entertaining and educational. And that's why we do what we do. And I so appreciate you taking the time today to join us again. And I can't wait to talk with you off air, as we say, to kind of continue how we might be able to work together, because I so respect what you do. Your knowledge base is incredible. I wish I understood half the words you used, because I'm like a history major, you know?
I wish I knew anything about history. I always have to ask people exactly when things happen.
You teach me chemistry, I'll teach you history. Andrew taught me a history lesson today. So we all have something to learn from each other. And that's why I love Educational Wednesdays, Professor Weed Wednesdays. So Dr. Mary Clifton, first of all, how can people find you? How can people find you? Give yourself a plug.
Oh, well, check out my certification program at the Cannabinoid Protocol, and available for bud tenders or for dispensaries to use for all of their bud tenders, or just for coaches, for individuals who want to work in a coaching aspect in their community to help people learn how to choose and use cannabis.
Fantastic. Well, we've got another couple of guests coming up in the final half hour. The Canna Cook couple from Arkansas. It's Chris and Chelsea Miles. Hang in there. We'll be back with more. Dr. Mary Clifton, thank you so much. Andrew, you don't go anywhere.
Thank you, Dr. Mary. We're going to connect you and I. I'm going to connect you with those bud tenders.
Awesome.
Thank you. And we'll be back with more of this show after this. Don't go away.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.